Hi, welcome to the Motley Fool's weekly healthcare show. I'm Max Macaluso, and joining me today is David Williamson.
Hi, everyone.
So, David, on Wednesday, we both went to the Atlantic's Healthcare Forum. This was a wonderful conference with a lot of thought leaders in the healthcare space.
It was excellent. I recommend anyone in the DC area attend next year.
I agree. What was the key takeaway?
Well, I think for me, Max, and there were a lot of great speakers. We had executives from WellPoint and Express Scripts, but I want to highlight Farzad Mostashari, who's the National Coordinator for Health IT, and he was talking about electronic health records. Now, in 2009, only 10% of hospitals used electronic health records. That's now up to 47% for 2012. So we've seen great growth there, but still a long way to go. And he was really highlighting it as a way to lower costs in the healthcare space, talking about how systems allow ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And he highlighted a community doctor who, with electronic health records, with some sort of reminder system, she believed she had about 80% of her patients vaccinated for the flu. She dealt with a lot of older patients. It turned out it was only 22%. So then she went around and, vaccinated these patients, hopefully keeping them healthy, and then that health will lower costs. And we've seen a lot of interest in lowering costs in healthcare. He mentioned venture capitalists are really attacking that segment. They think there's big money to be made in saving money. And since a lot of our viewers aren't VCs, I'm going to tell them to maybe take a look at Athena Health, which is an electronic health record company. They've seen 30% revenue growth at least for 13 straight years. They have a cloud-based system. They recently bought Epocrates, which is a mobile healthcare company. So it's a really interesting company. It's still a small cap player, but it's definitely one I think our viewers should take a look at. That was my big takeaway, but I'd be really interested to hear what your takeaway was.
Well, my favorite panel was on mental health, and in particular, I enjoyed what Thomas Insel, the director of the National Institute of Mental Health, had to say. Now, in that discussion, they talked about the BRAIN initiative, and just to recap that for our audience, that's President Obama's initiative to include $100 million in the 2014 budget to fund research in mapping the human brain. And normally, when we talk about this project, we think of applications to Alzheimer's disease, which is a terrible disorder that we really can't develop new treatments for because
we don't really understand it.
Exactly. But what I haven't thought about it is how the BRAIN initiative can actually help other areas of mental health, in particular schizophrenia or depression. So some of the statistics on suicide rates and mental health in general were really shocking to me. And in my own personal research, I really want to understand this therapeutic area much better and kind of understand the industry dynamics and why some of the big pharma companies aren't really developing many new treatments in this area.
Well, hopefully if this initiative is successful, it'll give the tools the pharma companies they need to develop more targeted treatments. And if there's money to be made, they will show up.
Exactly. So those are our headlines for the week. David, let's move on to movers and shakers. So, we've had a lot of companies report earnings, but in the biotech space, clinical data and FDA decisions are more important.
Well, that's right, Max, and I don't think any company shows that more than, say, Aveo Pharmaceuticals, which had just a really rough week, I feel, for investors in the company. It could have been a great week because they were going up to the FDA advisory committee for their kidney cancer drug tivozanib, but unfortunately, the stock fell 30% ahead of the committee as FDA briefing documents had a pretty negative take on the drug. But that was nothing compared to the 50% plunge that they saw after an overwhelming, really, 13-1 vote against the risk-benefit for tivozanib. So they're voting against approval. It's really unlikely the FDA is going to go against this panel. I think Aveo is going to have to run another phase 3 trial, and it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I mean, it did have good progression-free survival data over Onyx's Nexavar. It beat Nexavar by 3 months, although Nexavar is not the best-selling drug for this disease. But the overall survival data was down by about half a month. So it'll be interesting to see if they run another phase 3 trial, what that data looks like. But the stocks just stay away for the time being. They're going to have to dilute to raise money. And investors don't want to just sit on sort of a dead stock in the meantime.
Right. So it looks like a lot of challenges up ahead for Aveo. But David, let's move from a small biotech to a big biotech that's not really accustomed to hearing bad news, and that's Gilead.
Well, yeah, Gilead had a real up and down week, or maybe more down and then up is appropriate. They started the week trying to get approval for the 2 parts of their quad HIV pill, Stribild, that is not already available for individual sale, but the FDA said not so fast, which is sort of interesting because it is part of an already approved drug. I mean, these are available, but it turned out it wasn't efficacy or safety or anything like that. It was manufacturing-related problems, which manufacturing is a bit of a black box for investors. Hopefully this doesn't impact Stribild at all. It's a very important drug for the company. We have no indications that it will, and investors basically kind of shrugged off the news for the most part. But Stribild's launch is important. If there are manufacturing issues, Gilead's a good company. They'll clean it up. I don't think investors need to sweat that out too much.
Right. So kind of negative news about its HIV franchise, but positive news about its hepatitis C drug.
No, big news. I mean, the stock was up 4.5%, almost 5% after it released phase 2 data for sofosbuvir and ledaposphere together as a single pill, once daily regimen without ribavir, had a 95% cure rate, which was much higher than investors were expecting. It's really actually big news because a single, co-formulated pill will just blow AbbVie's drug regimen out of the water. It's going to have multiple pills with multiple dosing schedules. And there was some concern as well that Bristol Myers Squibb's declatosphere might get prescribed with sofosbuvir because it just keeps posting 100% cure rates with the drug. But because it might be more difficult, doctors will probably just go with the easy single pill insurance covered regimen that their patients are unlikely to screw up as far as taking multiple products. So it's a huge win. Gilead could really, I think people were being somewhat conservative about Gilead's dominance of this market. I think the doors are wide open now for them to just really dominate, and it really makes that Pharmacet purchase look just brilliant in hindsight.
I agree.
But this is definitely a drug. They're advancing it into phase 3 trials, so you need to have those trials on your radar. But speaking about things on our radar, Max, what stock is on your radar that investors need to be watching?
Well, I've been watching Celgene for quite a while. I've been kind of eyeing it for my
another big biotech.
Yeah, it's had a huge run up over the last year, but just before reporting Q1 earnings, it pulled back a little bit. But after reporting, things look just fine. Earnings per share are up, net income is up, revenue is up. Also, the day after earnings were reported, the CHMP gave a positive opinion for its drug Revlimid. So it looks like it will get some label expansion in Europe, and that label expansion should result in more earnings over time. So this is one I'm closely watching. I may pull the trigger sometime soon.
That's one of my favorite stocks as well. My stock to watch, though, for investors is not a stock I would necessarily recommend them invest in, but there's a lot going on, and we're going to get a lot more clarity about Dendreon, the prostate cancer immunotherapy company. They have Prevenge is their key drug. They report earnings this coming Thursday, May 9th. They have warned at the end of last year that the first quarter would not be as good as the fourth quarter. Now, the fourth quarter, we saw sales trends turn around. They were making good progress into community urologists and other community doctors. They are struggling, however, in the academic center space. We're seeing dwindling use there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with those trends. The question is, how much worse sequentially is Q1 going to be from Q4? Because sequential growth is what's important when you're launching a product. Also, it'll be interesting to see if Johnson & Johnson Zytiga, now that it's a first-line therapy, what is it doing to Prevenge sales? Sales of Zytiga grew 72% for the quarter. Are those coming at Prevenge's expense? And, I'll also be interested to see if they say anything about Medivation's Xtandi. It was approved as a second-line use here in the U.S. if it's being used off-label as a first-line therapy. And also, it recently received a positive opinion over in Europe. It's not approved yet. Dendreon also going for European approval in the coming months. Something to watch. But if they have any comments about Xtandi's approval as well.
Right, so it seems like a pivotal quarter for Dendreon.
Yep.
David, that just about wraps it up for this week. Thanks a lot for joining us, and if you're interested in more healthcare news, tune in again next week. Once again, for David Williamson, I'm Max Macaluso, and Fool On.
Fool On.